I'm Daniel, the past life regressionist, and it's time to begin.
Lift off and the clock has started.
This is Timeless Spirituality. Enjoy your Trinity time. Hey everyone, welcome back to Timeless Spirituality. It is time for another brand new episode, and this was another fun one. We go super duper duper deep, so I'd like to thank my guest JK Ultra Jenn for just giving me a lot of time to record this episode. We spent a lot of time doing it a couple days ago, and I just wanted to get it out to you guys because I thought it was great. And I'm breaking it up into two parts because of how long it is. So it will just kind of abruptly cut off towards the end. So part two will be next week. And I think the great thing on a personal level about doing these podcasts, at least for me personally, is it really helps me understand my communication style. And I see that being out there in the world, that my brain can be 10 steps ahead of where my mouth is. And that's why I think it's just so helpful, because it helps to have that mirrored back at me. So with that, there was a point in this episode where I think that I didn't do a proper enough job of explaining my thoughts behind something. And I just kind of want to expand upon it right now at the beginning, where if you have a session with me, I am one of the most gentle people you will ever meet. I can come off kind of, a little not always very restrained, but when we do a session, I show up 110%. Your beliefs are your beliefs, and I'm there for it. And that's what's important, is where you are in your journey. And I don't think I did a well enough job of articulating that. So I just wanted to get that out at the front of the episode, because this really is just a learning experience. At the end of the day, I think we're all just these little beings on this planet, just learning about ourselves. Or, as we talk about in this episode, we're all the same. So with that said, if you would like to book a regression with me to discover who, when, and where you have been throughout time, you can reach me on Instagram at The Past Life Regressionist, or you can go ahead and book through my website, thepastliferegressionist.com. And now it's time to begin. Okay, you ready? I'm going to include this in the episode right now. Everyone, I just made a big boo-boo. I forgot to hit record. So Jenn and I were probably recording for, I think it was 8 minutes before. So I just want to apologize to Jenn again for taking those 8 minutes, even though I think we're on the same page about time not being linear. I'm sorry. I live in a linear world, so I'm sorry for taking those 8 minutes from you. My bad. Oops. Yeah. Anyways, Jenn, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hello, welcome. I'm excited to be here and to chat about all of these topics.
God, that was going so well too. All right. Second time around. I'm excited to talk about your 40-day challenge. So before we jump into that, do you want to just talk about what your 40-day challenge is?
Yeah. So I'm doing a challenge right now that I'm actually going to be kind of revisiting a lot of my beliefs and a lot of my own content and looking at it through a more expanded lens. Of course, we need to say things for social media. So some of the hooks are like, I'm debunking my own content. It's really not debunking. What it is like expanding the perspective and how my beliefs have grown and evolved. And also, this all started for me with a 30-day challenge, actually. So it's very much a bookend of how everything started, because in 2020, two of my best friends we all thought it would be like hilarious to like get TikToks and post on TikTok. And we're like, let's post on TikTok for 30 days. And on the first day, I posted a conspiracy video and it went viral. And I was like, oh, you like that? How about this? And then the next day, the video did even better. And then I was like, oh, you like that? How about this? And then the next day, it went to 1 million. And then those 30 days literally changed my life, because I posted kind of 10 years of research, exploration, rabbit holes. One of the main things that I had posted in those 30 days was the entire breakdown of Conversations with God. Conversations with Nostradamus by Dolores Cannon, the Nostradamus prophecies. And I broke it down in comparison to Bible prophecies and basically every apocalypse prophecy across cultures and correlated everything. And by the end of the 30 days, I had like 200,000 followers. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess this is what I'm doing now. And then, so it kind of just created my whole life was this 30-day challenge, the life that I'm living now, just completely randomly with no intention of that being that. I thought it was going to be a funny little thing that we were going to do. So now kind of revisiting it, how many years later, 4 years later, with this 40-day challenge of revisiting a lot of those things, because there's a lot of topics that people like know me for or go to me for, and my beliefs have evolved on them over these last several years. So I've been meaning to kind of go back and give like more expanded perspective on a lot of those topics.
Before I ask you more what your beliefs were, do you think that your beliefs were shaped by the feedback you were getting?
No, because it was so fast. And also, it had been 10 years of these rabbit holes before that. So, yeah, the feedback, I would say it was nice to be acknowledged for sure. But also, there was shadow work that had to be done because, I was living in LA. I moved to LA. I had gone to film school. I had wanted to work in film. I did work in film, had a lot of, not great experiences. And that's not what I was attempting to do at that time. I had like been writing these different TV shows that I was trying to get picked up at the time. And this kind of randomly happened from my own interests and own hobbies. And I just spewed out everything so fast. And then when people wanted more, I was like, oh, by the way, I'm going to go to the Harvey Weinstein trial for the next 2 months and cover that every day. And people were like, what? We want to hear about 5D. We want to hear about the new earth. We want to hear about timelines and consciousness and the Mandela effect. And I was like, I'm going to go to a rape trial. Bye. And, so I wish that I was a little bit more motivated by that, because then I would have been more consistent in posting, instead of just being like, sorry, I don't want to talk about this anymore.
Dang. Kudos to you for being authentic to yourself.
It's a blessing, but at the same time, I'm actually revisiting one of my favorite books, which, coming back to it, I haven't read a fiction book in a long time because I'm more of a nonfiction reader. And reading this fiction book, which is one of my favorite books from when I was in high school, is called Grendel. Anyone who's not familiar with Beowulf was like the oldest piece of literature that was found in English. And the monster in that book is named Grendel. And it's like kind of like, it's longer than the Odyssey, I think. It's like an epic poem in Old English. And in the 70s, there was this book written from the monster's perspective. And that book really kind of was a guiding light for me, because this creature didn't know it was a monster until it was labeled a monster by the kingdom, so that they had their villain. And this monster starts leaning into the identity that it's being given, starts leaning into, oh, I'm a monster? Well, then I'll kill, then I'll harm, then I'll hurt, then I'll scare people. And that book really impacted me, because I always was like, so many people become a character of themselves. And once something starts working for you, it's very easy to start playing what is working for you. And so that's just something that's always been very in my awareness. And I actually see it in a lot of other type of spiritual influencer type of people, that they just start playing themselves. And who even knows if they even believe that anymore? They're just doing it for the clicks. They're just doing it for the stuff. So me being able to kind of be like, oh yeah, all of these things. And a lot of the stuff that I've shared in my new challenge of like revisiting these beliefs, a lot of them have been well received But then there's also a lot of people who are like, oh, you're controlled. Who's paying you now? Oh, this is manipulation. This is deception. You're false light and all the blah, blah, blah stuff, But it would be a lot easier for me to keep talking about the Antichrist and 5D and all of these things and star seeds and all of these topics that I've evolved my perspective on.
So what was the catalyst then for you to do this 40-day challenge where you basically revisited these beliefs and say, hey, here's how I've evolved on them?
So I'm part of a program with a spiritual teacher that is named Mami Onami. And she is so like raw, authentic. Like she is so, I love her. I love her work. I've been lucky enough to become friends with her. And I joined her membership. And I did a former 40-day challenge with her, but it wasn't on social media. It was private. And this one that she's doing now is a 40-day social media challenge. And, I'm in a little bit of an interesting position, maybe from some of the other people in the group, because a lot of people are maybe kind of starting something new on social media. And so for me, I'm like, was in a good position that okay, yes, I already have a platform on social media, but I've been meaning to for the last 3 years to address because after I kind of let all that information out, it created space inside of me from these beliefs that I had, that then there was a lot of space for new information to come in, a lot of space for self-discovery to come in, a lot of space for new experiences. And so it was actually not long after I posted all of that stuff that my beliefs started changing, but I actually needed time to put it into concise words because it's hard to put, I wouldn't say it's hard, but you have to really know what you're saying to get a really big concept into a very tight, short video that it fully ties a bow on a topic. And that's why it was easy for me in the beginning, because these were topics that I had been deep diving into for 10 years. Now the beliefs are changing in the moment. And, I don't want to put a half-baked idea out there. It's just kind of not how I like to present information. So what I had been doing, though, is I do my live streams, and my live streams are kind of where a lot of those things happened more in this type of way, in a conversational way. But because, in short form, things can be so taken out of context that I wanted to be fully clear. So it actually took me time to put into words why these things didn't resonate the same way without bashing them, because that's the other thing that happens with people when they start to kind of evolve out of spiritual beliefs. They actually don't kind of graduate to the level of paradox. They just stay on the same level of polarity, light and dark, right and wrong, and they just swing to the other side and go, now this is all wrong. And that's actually not really, in my opinion, spiritual growth. It's just spiritual ping-ponging, because you don't actually elevate to another level.
I'm guilty of that sometimes. I have those moments. So one thing you did bring up there that I do want to expand upon, you said that you have to be very knowledgeable about a concept to get it in a short video, and really know what you're talking about. I disagree. And I just want your feedback on this, because there was someone who I recently saw put a video out having to do with, I believe it was the full moon in Scorpio. And this was someone I'd had a conversation with a month earlier and asked them about astrology, and they knew nothing about it. Yet in this video, it got the point across of what the full moon in Scorpio meant. But I'm just sitting there saying, this person knows nothing about what they're saying. This is completely regurgitated. Even if they started learning astrology the day that we talked, there is no way they could be this proficient in it within a month. It's not possible. So what's your thought on that?
I don't want to sound rude to that person, but is that big of a concept? That, not to say that that's not beautiful content that helps people, but I'm trying to, my goal and what I'm sharing is like the deepest answers of the universe. Like one of the ones that I just did recently is like, how could past lives be real if time was simultaneous?
You want to do an episode on that?
I can tell you right now, I got it down to 3 minutes.
Right, it's fun.
And, how can we be one soul and individual souls? And does that discredit the fact that there's old and new souls? So, I like to answer those questions that are debatable. Like kind of another one that I just did in this challenge is really about like manifestation, right? There's every single thing about manifestation contradicts each other. So why are all these contradicting thoughts? So what is the real core of, a manifestation technique? These techniques they're just vehicles for your state of being. So it doesn't matter. You want to use a vision board or don't use any of them if you want, because all the techniques can work or not work. And that's really like, where what I'm saying is kind of like to be able to get it to the point that like all the questions are answered from like a whole thing. But yeah, astrology, that's kind of the moon and Scorpio. These are like archetypes, which what we were talking about before
I forgot to record. Yeah.
That was our pre-chat. But so I'm not saying that you can't share things, because I don't want to discourage people from sharing online, because I mean, everybody has their stuff to share. Everybody has their things to say. For me, I like that brain bender, really like push the boundaries of ideas and beliefs. So I wanted to say it in a way that I really had embodiment in saying it. And that's a difference, I think, too, right? Is you can tell when people are embodied in what they're saying or when they're ungrounded in what they're saying. And that's one of the things that has come up in several of my QHHT sessions is people who've been afraid about sharing stuff online, and they are meant to. And that's why I don't want to discourage people saying you don't need to be an expert.
No, just be honest about where you are.
You have to be honest about where you are. You have to be honest about what you're experiencing, be willing to grow, willing to change, willing to put yourself out there, willing to get bad comments, because that's another part of the container that you have to hold. But one of the things that has come up in these sessions is two people could say the same thing. If one person is grounded and the other one is not, one person sounds crazy and one person says the same exact crazy thing and sounds completely resonant. So I think that's what it is. I needed these topics to be embodied for me to be able to say them in a way that really can land.
When I support that, I think that's the way that it should be. So I think I brought that up because someone can appear to be knowledgeable, but I think still without that further explanation, I mean, you're just basically saying you weren't disparaging astrology. It just, hey, that's one corner of a big topic.
Right. If they were to explain the entirety of astrology, you really need to know what you're talking about.
Exactly. Good. I'm glad we cleared that up, because a lot of my fear, and I'm going to say it, one of my fears is having this platform and feeling responsible for what I put out there, and anyone being led astray, at least the way that I see it, in one way or another. And then someone going and watching a video and be like, oh, that person seemed to know what they were talking about. So they know what they're talking about. I need to take them seriously, when it's like, they don't know what the hell they're talking about.
I so resonate with that. I so feel the same way about, it's definitely one of the things that I sit with a lot. And also part of the reason why I do want to address these things and not be continuously talking about topics that I know get views, that I know work, but like, is that truly helping people anymore? Like, say, for example, one of the first day of the challenge, I started with a bang, which was, the reptilian topic. And I've always been more presenting the information and allowing people to kind of make their own decision, just because that's the way I like to present information. It's at least in short form, right? Because short form, if in long form,
there's only so much you can do in short form.
Right. And it can be, the thing is you have a responsibility. You don't know if that video goes out to 100,000 people. You don't know those 100,000 people, how they're going to receive it. And a lot of people who post online in this space, as much as they might say they are so love and light and they are this and they are that and they're the light worker and they're guiding the way, they genuinely do not give a damn about the person who's watching that video getting completely disrupted and ungrounded and fear-mongered and led astray from what they're doing. Because the amount of people that crash out on me in my comments and say, so-and-so said this. And I'm like, well, first of all, what do I care what they said? But also when I do talk to these people, because then sometimes then they'll DM me, and I do give it the time, because I do sometimes feel like, I mean, I'm also good with trolls. Like sometimes I'm kind of like, you know what? Let's talk. Let's see. Let's talk then. Let's figure it out. And a lot of times when I talk to people, they are getting super derailed from what their passion is leading them towards. They see some video like, oh, I was practicing astral travel, and then so and so said that someone can snatch your soul and entities attached to you and all this fear mongering stuff. And it's like, okay, that's their perspective from their worldview. But also, how do you know that that person is not like they're following their path of what they're being led to do, and now they're being led astray? So that's why I tried to, that's another reason why I like to like be very clear in what I'm going to say, because you don't know who is in those numbers of those comments, and you don't know where they're at.
Mhm.
You don't know if they're in a grounded place, or if you're going to say something that diminishes their journey that they're on right now.
Or even the influence that they have on others.
Right. And exactly, you know, I mean, there's so much, I mean, obviously the algorithm loves fear. It loves outrage. It loves conflict. So, you know, if I go over there and say they're harvesting your energy, they want you dumb, they want you sick, they want you enslaved, they're feeding on your loosh, it does get views. It gets crazy views. And, you know, in the first day of this challenge, I had talked about be weary of the people who are telling you what to be afraid of, because they're profiting off fear. They're fear mongering you. They're actually profiting off of your negative emotions. Like everything that they say that these reptilians are doing is what they are doing in that exact video. And that's one of the things that, you know, I try to get across is that spiritual teachers, this was my own shadow work journey of this. When I first came out, put all my, everything I had, all of the research and everything that I've experienced, then I started working in this space and going to these events and going to these conferences and meeting all of these people who I had loved their books. I had loved their work. And I'm like, oh, a lot of these people are not who they say they are. A lot of them are womanizers. A lot of them are creeps. A lot of them are narcissists and whatever the hell else, you know? And that was that is very difficult and can make you very bitter, because then you're like, oh, well, one, is this all bullshit? Which I don't feel that, but some people can come into these spiritual spaces and then be like, screw this spiritual space, and then want to leave it. And then, you know, I had to sit with that and meditate with it, and the letdown of so many, like meeting so many people and being let down and let down and let down and being like, whoa, these people, none of these people are who they say they are. Maybe not none, right? Because there is amazing people.
Yeah.
But it is
There's a
a
couple.
large amount, especially the ones that do very well.
Yeah.
A lot of them are not who they say they are at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so that constant letdown, I had to sit with that and meditate. And, you know, the message that I got, one, is it's not my job to save anybody. I'm not Jesus Christ. I don't have to save anybody on their path. Everybody needs to learn their own discernment. And these people, they're teaching the subtext. They're actually not teaching the words that they think that they're saying. They think they're teaching you about sacred geometry and raising your vibration and consciousness. Really, what they're teaching you is the subtext of what they're saying and the energy of what they're saying. And from doing QHHT, you know, because we hear a person's whole life story before going into the regression, I would see, you know, sometimes people tell me like which spiritual teachers that they are really into or whose work, because that sometimes will come up in their story of parts of their awakening. And I see these patterns of these kind of narcissistic teachers. Then these people have narcissistic parents, narcissistic relationships, getting taken advantage of at work. So I feel like it's this healing spiral. They go through it at these different levels, and then they start being drawn towards spiritual teachers who are the same pattern of all the other wounds that they've had. So that's what I was trying to say in that video, is the subtext. This person who's telling you be afraid because they're harvesting your energy is literally the subtext is I'm harvesting your energy by getting all the views out of this and then having you walk through your life with fear while I feel good about getting 100,000, 1 million views on this.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally hear what you're saying on that one. And I mean, this is something that I think about often, because I think about the aspect of projection and how a lot of people will say, oh, well, they're just saying, you know, it's projection. If they're saying this, they're doing it themselves. And I can see that with some, because look, I'm on the same page as you are. I've worked with a lot of these people and I see a very different side of them when it's one-on-one or just whatever it may be, or like your story isn't lining up with what you're putting out there to the world. And yeah, I do believe that the projection aspect is a real thing. But I also thought about someone who says, oh, I'm upset that that person murdered someone. Just because they say, oh, I'm upset that that person murdered someone, that doesn't mean that they murdered someone. So it may not be projection. It may just be they're genuinely saying, I don't like that that happened. That's not right. It doesn't fit into my moral framework. I think it's wrong. So I think that distinction needs to be made also, because I think that's also what gets swept up in a lot of all of this, is that notion of if they're saying it and they're against it, then it's projection and they are doing it. I think it's some, but not all. And I mean, that kind of goes around to, yeah,
that's a very extreme example.
Of course,
and usually, for some reason, those are usually the examples people go to. Like, obviously, let's say like Dolores Cannon's work or Michael Newton's work, where, you know, they say like, you choose your life, and they're like, the serial killers, the rapists, the this, the that. And it's like, that's usually where people immediately go. And I understand that we have to always like go all the way to the edges to find the middle, right? Because how would we know what the edges are? How would we know what the middle ground is if we don't know what the edges are? Mm-hmm. So everybody really is like, it's a natural instinct to go to those edges. You know, I don't think every single statement that everybody makes in the world is them hiding some nefarious things, you know, but we are also having constant subtext. There's always subtext. There's life at the surface and then life happening beneath the surface. And that is always happening. We're always in our conscious and our unconscious. Mm-hmm. And the more that we do explore those unconscious things, and it's about us. Mm-hmm. It's not about that person. It has nothing to do with that narcissistic spiritual teacher. It has to do with, why am I attracted to this? If somebody murdered someone, why do I want to give my energy to a murder trial case and want to put my attention there? What is in me that is seeking justice? What is in me that is looking for this mirror in the outside world? And that's the thing with mirrors, right? In a way, everything is a mirror to us, but also you can look in the mirror, you'll never truly see yourself, because a mirror is a distorted version of you. The way we look in the mirror is not the way we look in real life, because it's an inverted thing. So the same thing with that mirror concept is like the projection is like, I do believe everything's a mirror, but also you're never going to see your true self. Mm-hmm. We can't. In a reflection will always be inverted. The camera will never be us. So there's these. And the same thing with, say, like relationships, like we're drawn to certain people romantically, but there is a shadow aspect of every relationship and every attraction. And usually there's this unconscious part of ourself that another person plays out externally. And that is the mirror for us to see the unconscious of ourselves. So, I mean, the same thing to the why is everybody obsessed with true crime and people like documentaries of everybody getting murdered and everything like that? I think if we zoom out enough, it's the same question that God consciousness asks itself by going through the process of involution and becoming these individual souls. Because how does pure love, the absolute, know itself? Through contrast. So sometimes it's a reflection of us. Sometimes it's a contrast of us. So it's hard to know without really looking at ourselves under a magnifying glass to really know what that mirror is trying to tell us, or that projection's trying to tell us, or the things we're drawn to are trying to tell us.
For me personally, I wouldn't say I got super carried away in the concept of starseeds when I first started coming around to all this, but it did fill a void for me. And fortunately for me, I wasn't on social media at the time. I wasn't telling anyone that I was out there having these experiences. I mean, there were a few select people that I shared, even that I had a past life regression. But other than that, it was more of an internal struggle that I was having, and thinking that I had found peace by like having these answers unlocked of like, oh, this is why I feel a certain way. And I think the moment that I really started to snap out of it was when I was with one of my mentors, someone who I had deep respect for. And I told them that I was going to be taking an astrology class. And they tried to talk me out of it by telling me, no. You're too gifted for that. You're too special. You don't need that. It's just going to take you away from just diving in and being in that with specialness, which of course, I love the flattery of that. I mean, who doesn't want to think of themselves as someone who's special? But in that moment, I also realized, why is this going to harm me? Why is what I perceive to be this enhancement of learning this other practice, why will that make me any less than what I am? So I think it started to unravel from there and seeing like, what are this person's beliefs? Why do they feel this way? What is it about them? And are they trying to keep me in this because they're trying to control me, or do they genuinely believe this? And I actually think that they genuinely believed it. But nonetheless, I think a lot of my motivation for having these types of conversations, because I followed your account for a while, and I waited to reach out to you until I saw you do your 40-day challenge, because I'm like, yes, this is the moment. Deconstruction. Yes, because I don't want to see anyone get swept up the way that I did. But I don't think it was ultimately detrimental. I think it was a path that I needed to go down so I could be on the other side of it and have the self-awareness to see I can't do that to anyone else. When I have someone who has a session and they see themselves as an ET or whatever it is, I need to be able to help ground them into, okay, you may have been this in another life, but you're human now. I don't care what your star lineage is. You want to go down that path, find yourself in maybe a cult, but what does this mean about you as a person? Why do you feel this way? And how do you enhance your human experience and live the life that you're meant to be as a human? So that's why I think it may have been a necessary component of my journey, but nonetheless, I'm pretty sure that that's my motivation when it comes to a lot of these things. But then also I have to ask myself the question, is this really my responsibility ultimately? Or should I be out there having more conversations about past life regression? I mean, I have a podcast. It's called Timeless Spirituality. I'm Daniel, the past life regressionist. I've made my identity around past life regression. Why am I out here talking about this? So it's a bunch of shadow work for me at the same time. And it really is just posing the question, well, who the hell are you?
Right. And so kind of that question of like, who the hell am I? Which everybody asks, hopefully, usually people who are progressing are asking, who are they? And the way that we know ourselves is the outside world. That's how we start to know ourselves. So, the same thing with the starseed concept. I never really felt that I was one of them. I liked the concept a lot. I never felt like I was one of the starseed species, races, whatever, but I loved the concept. And, that's because of my own experience. So, which is the other thing too, is, I have my UFO abduction experience that my whole family had when I was a child. So I've always been this alien person. So the new age stuff and the spirituality stuff came way after for me than aliens. And for me, it was grays, and it's still grays and mantises. And those were like the beings that ever since I was younger that I feel connected to. And with the starseed thing, it resonated a lot with me. Same thing with like Dr. Michael Newton's work. When I read Journey of Souls, I resonated so deeply, but
Amazing
I didn't feel like
book.
I didn't feel like I was any of them. So I was also kind of in this place of like, I truly wholeheartedly believe that this is true.
Oh, you
I
mean
just don't.
You weren't the purple light or whatever it was?
Yeah, I don't see myself as any of these characters in this book, though, or any of these starseed, but I love these concepts and believe in them. And, maybe that was kind of because this path was evolving in this way for me. I probably, if any title, I would have probably resonated most with being a conspiracy theorist, because my awakening was very intertwined with that. Like that was the extreme kind of blowing open. And there's so many different ways that people have spiritual experiences and spiritual awakenings, right? Like sometimes it could be an event, a moment. People can get it during yoga if you're lucky and have it the easy way. But then again, it could be a Kundalini awakening, which could be the hardest way. It could be through a traumatic event. It could be through loss. It could be through conspiracy, whatever. So what it is like when your awareness goes from here to here. And it depends on what brings your awareness from here to here and expands it. And sometimes that's where spiritual psychosis comes in, is because your awareness went from here to here. And I have a lot of sympathy for the people who woke up in 2020, because that was like ungrounding as hell. Mm-hmm. I'm lucky that I had already been like over 10 years in by that point, that I was just like, see, I told you. And like, I told you. But it was like an easier place to be in than these people who really got ripped open. And I had a lot of sympathy for them, which is why I think, because there was a lot of psychosis, to go so fast and have the physical world mirror what you're doing. Whereas, like you said, you've been doing this so long. So I'm sure yours happened a very long time ago. So like being still, and like for me, having my UFO experience at 5 years old, I always had to have this information integrated in day-to-day normal life. Whereas people who woke up in 2020, it blasts them open and then the world is upside down on top of it. So like their outer world was mirroring something very extreme, which is why I do have a lot of compassion for that, because it's difficult to have it that way. It's not a slow drip. They didn't get the slow drip, book by book, information. Also, the information wasn't as readily available. Takes time to write a book. There wasn't these 3-minute videos, 2-minute videos to just blast a whole topic into their mind. So it was more slow drip information. But with the starseed thing, it's externally understanding ourselves, right? Because at first it's that expansion of I'm so much more. But eventually, depending how heavily you identify with it, you start to just get further from the self and further from the human experience. Like you're saying, was what matters is being human here. And then, you bringing up working with your clients, that's something that I am try to be very careful with, because my beliefs and my way of communicating is very like direct. But when you're holding that container for someone else to go through their experience, like, you have to remain neutral. If somebody is experiencing that they're an Arcturian, then I need to honor what they're experiencing, not through my lens. And the same thing with past lives. Like I kind of tell people, you might experience a past life. You might experience earlier in this life. You might end up in the void. You might end up in some symbolic scenario. And I'm like, whatever it is, this could be a real past life, or this could just be a mirror of your current situation that is easier to understand. So sometimes past lives are just like what you're going through right now, but it's a lot easier to see if you're like a pilgrim and not yourself. So I just try to tell people, like in the beginning of the session, that like anything that comes through, we are extracting information today. We're going in, we're pulling a lot. You have the rest of your life to take it, leave it, implement it, don't implement it, integrate it, don't integrate it. You could change your mind. You could say this is a true past life. You really lived this life. And in a year, question if you ever lived that life, and it doesn't discredit anything. You just need to allow yourself to be on that journey. I mean, for myself with past lives, the first time I had done past life regression from a recording of Brian Weiss. And it was like the gateway drug. Yeah. And so, and it was so creepy because I had never done something like that. I was aware of past lives. I literally was in my apartment in Hollywood, and I was like, I felt like I was levitating, like as I started to go in, and the light bulb exploded. And then I got up and had to cry from fear because I was like, what happened? I go back. I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I got this out. I go back into it, have this kind of past life as this woman who has a baby and she's kind of like in captivity or whatever. What's so crazy, I ended up meeting this woman like 7 years later, and she's like, oh, I went to a Brian Weiss event. She describes the exact same past life to me that I experienced, identical. And I'm like, how did this woman have my exact same past life? And I'm like, okay, what is going on here? Another past life that I had done around that time, which was just some random recording from some random girl that I found somewhere. I don't even know where I found this recording, but she didn't have these kind of post-hypnotic suggestion that you have in QHHT and in some other methods that really say like, this life is the only one that matters. This was just getting information, can't harm you mentally or physically, and really separating and kind of grounding back into the present, sending those other things back, creating those disconnections between the experience and just retrieving what's helpful. This kind of just takes you out of it. I was literally traumatized from that past life for a couple years because it was so vivid and so traumatic, and I believed it fully. And that was years ago. And then around 2020, I remember starting to kind of get the feeling that my past lives were not real. And that then I went under QHHT for the first time with Jeroen DeWitt. And when I was under, I saw myself like almost, it was like an Akashic Records type of place. And I saw like a Dewey Decimal System for anyone who's too young to know what that is, you know? And so it's like I took out, like as if I was in a library, I went through a drawer and I just went to women. And it was like I ate all past lives as women. It was like a pill that I took. And then I was like, what was that? Like, and I had all of these, every time I'd done a past life regression, it was very traumatic experiences of women throughout different times of history. And even still, that's mostly what comes up for me. And then, Dolores Cannon talks about this concept of like imprinting, which came up in Keepers of the Garden, that like that subject, Phil, had not experienced any of those past lives, that they were imprints that he had. And when I saw myself like kind of eat all past lives, take this pill of all past lives as women, at first it's very like kind of disorienting because you associate and connect with these past lives. But then it's very freeing. So it's like, that's the same thing with the starseed. At first you feel really connected. It makes you feel more. But then eventually it can start to separate you from yourself. And you have to start releasing these identities too. Okay, maybe someone was a Pleiadian. Does it matter? Like, does it matter right now?
Mm-mm. Wow, there's a lot to take in there. But just to piggyback on what you were talking about, especially with imprints, for anyone who's not familiar with the concept, it's something that Dolores Cannon presented where, because I believe with Phil, it was later on, right, that, and I'll put this in quotes still because I never treat this stuff as an absolute, but in quotes, discovered that this was his first incarnation on Earth, right? Because it was like, it was a bunch of extraterrestrial stuff. But prior to that, they had other sessions where he'd seen himself as human. So the question became, well, how could that be possible? This is his first time on Earth. How could he have had these other lives? So the concept of imprints was basically the soul, we'll just call it like taking from a well or taking from what is known as the Akashic Records, and takes pieces from other lives that other people lived or other souls had experienced and imprinted it on their essence. So if this was his first time here, he would have prior experiences to draw upon. So he wasn't just kind of, shooting in the dark. Okay. I don't know if that's the case, because that also, to me, looks at time through a very linear lens.
Exactly.
That's my issue with that. It's just, it makes sense in a linear lens.
It's another story to understand a big concept. And that's what I think almost everything that comes through spirit is. It's all like a story, and we had talked about this before we started recording about like where I believed a lot of spiritual concepts to be what they are, this story of what they are. And, I was giving the example of like when you're raising a child, if you're trying to teach them not to lie, but lying gets them what they want, we need to have another reason why you don't lie. So you teach them about the little boy who cried wolf. And then religion, we have a whole entire Bible of stories to teach lessons. Kids have fairy tales. People in Hinduism have stories. People in Christianity have stories. People in every religion have stories. And then people come to the new age and they think, oh, this isn't stories. This is the real one. This is the truth, actually.
That Bible was a bunch of bullshit, but this whole thing,
all these other stories are just stories.
Yeah.
But this is not a story. This is true. And that's where, what I've been exploring through this 40-day challenge is like, and then even the concepts, like what we're talking about past lives. If it serves you to believe it's your true past life, then it serves you. There might be a time where it no longer serves you, because also people can over-identify with past lives and actually start to create negative patterns in this life and actually start to put blinders on to their current medical problems or whatever, because they believe it's because something happened in a past life. And so it can get detrimental sometimes if you over-identify with those things. And then the same thing with imprints. Imprints, I think, is another story to explain something that's way too complex, which is we're all one, right? It's all in the ethers. Everything exists. All the past lives are everybody's. like we have access to all of them. And whatever your kind of story, energy, situation, problem, frequency that you're at, whatever wording you want to use, that's what comes up as what you need to see. Because I mean, sometimes, doing this type of work, like sometimes something comes up which couldn't really ever be a past life, like a true historical past life, or like something like there's stuff that happens in places that it's kind of like, okay, this definitely couldn't be, but symbolically, it's what this person needs to know. Like, I had someone and it was so beautiful, but it was like she was kind of on like Mars or something and like getting samples. And then, she was also going to this other place. There was two places like overlapping. The other place was like some jungle planet thing that she was getting samples from. And whether that was like really what she did or didn't do, it was like the message out of it was like doing things like just to do them. Like the job is
That's what's important.
Yeah, the job is just to experience. So it was kind of showing her a job that she had to show her that like, this is her job. And it was showing that like, okay, you could be in this super desolate place that is completely just deserted out, or this jungle place that's super alive. And it was showing her like she desired the aliveness of the jungle, but then in the jungle, she desired the silence of this destitute place. And it was like showing her like, your job is to experience these extremes. So sometimes it's symbolic, where it's maybe it isn't a whole kind of life narrative, and it's kind of showing through these different things. And I mean, the higher self, the subconscious, whatever people want to call it, whatever resonates with them, it's showing them exactly what they need, and that's one of the things too with my own beliefs changing. I've had some other people ask me like, oh, okay, well, if you don't really believe fully in these like past life concept, are you going to like direct your clients to not experience past lives? And I'm like, it's not my job to know what they need. That's their experience. How dare I project where I'm at? I might be at somewhere else in 6 months, and 6 months after that. This person needs this experience the same way that when I did my first QHHT, the space was held for me. When I did ayahuasca, the experience was held for me. And I came out of my ayahuasca experience saying all types of crazy stuff. And thank God to the people in my life who were going to hold the space for me to fully believe that those things were all true.
So I think when it comes down to past life regression, QHHT, or whatever modality it is, I mean, at least for me as a practitioner, I mean, I'm right there with you. Just because I may not fully believe that all these are past lives, I'm more on the side of I think they are, I believe they are, but I'm open to the idea of them being archetypal. And I think the best thing I can do for someone is just be, as open as possible in saying, look, just like you said before, it's about the information that you extract from the session, the situation, and what you decide to do with it. But I just wouldn't treat it as an absolute. It's how do you enhance your life in the here and now? And what changes do you make in the here and now? And I don't know if you've ever run into this, but I've had people say to me, oh, I've read these stories about information that's been able to be confirmed that someone got from past life regression, something they never could have known. And that is proof of past lives. And I say, look, I believe in past lives, but to me, that is not proof. That does not prove that past lives are real. To me, all that proves is that there is something bigger, something that we have the ability to tap into, and that they were able to extract information that could be confirmed. It doesn't mean it was theirs. It just means it was there. So I think the best place anyone can be is in the place of uncertainty almost, or never treating these things as absolutes. Fellow time travelers, your journey through time awaits you. Just want to thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. And if you're interested in discovering who, when, and where you have been throughout time, and you'd like to book a sesh with me, just go ahead and send me a message on Instagram at The Past Life Regressionist, or you can reach me through my website, yourpastliferegressionist.com.